Hospital Porter's Pride and Dignity. Stop the New World Order. Welcome to her Panwo TV. Welcome to this fine day here in Oxford. I've had, it's been pretty good actually. I've got some good news for you. Yeah, this is an upbeat video for a change. Yeah, this is actually my first ever unboxing video. Now, I think you're going, Ben, what are you going to be doing next? Makeup tutorials? I bet you're going to start putting videos of cats on as well, aren't you? Yes, you're going normie, mate. You're going mainstream. You've lost it. You're not a loony anymore. We don't respect you anymore. You're trying to play for the audience. You're going to start monetising your videos and become a millionaire, aren't you, Ben? That's what you're thinking, aren't you? Okay, well, that's understandable. You might assume that because it is an unboxing video. But this is an unboxing video with a difference. Yes, this is not quite what you might think when I say unboxing, because when I say unboxing it's a bit of a clickbaity title. I don't actually mean it literally or in the normal sense of unboxing videos. You know, I'm not going to show you the latest earphones or some new laptop or something. I'm going to show you something very different, and it's not in a box, it's in a bag. But to give you a bit of background, something very interesting happened. Now, as you know, I'm sort of like pretty much centred on the internet when it comes to my social life now. I live here in Oxford, this seat of Illuminati training, and there are a few people in my local area who are sort of on my side. They're in my sort of ballpark, and indeed that's why I established Dreaming Saucers, which is a local group, which is of course based on the conference I did. Dreaming Saucers, the conference that I helped organise with Tino Magaro and a couple of other people. But Dreaming Saucers is like a local meet-up group, and I met a few people. A lot of them I met on the, actually I know them from the lockdown protest I went to, and indeed I met one of them I know. I didn't meet her, but I know her, and she was at the Marlon Solomon event as well, where this guy was slagging off David Icke. So Dreaming Saucers is like quite an interesting group, a local group. But guess what? I might have actually made possibly a new IRL friend, because it's difficult to make IRL friends now these days. But this is very, very strange. I was just walking along. I was actually near my dad's place. I was just dropping off some shopping for a client. It was just like one of my jobs. It's this a lady who lives near my dad who I do shopping for, because she's an old lady who can't get out. Yeah, it's a nice work if you can get it. This woman called over to me from the front garden. She said, "Hey, Ben, it's Ben, isn't it?" And I said, "Yes." And she says, "Oh, I'm Rachel." And I looked at her and I thought, "Rachel who? What are you talking about? Who's Rachel who?" And she then explained who she was. And this is really amazing. She's somebody who I knew long, long ago when I lived in Wales. Well, I was born in West Wales, in Aberystwyth, and I lived in Lampeter. And this apparently is a girl I used to play with when I was a little kid, and I do vaguely remember her. I vaguely remember the family. There was her brother, who I played with a lot more. This girl was a couple of years older than me. Of course, it doesn't really matter now, because when you're sort of my sort of age, 2 years doesn't make any difference. But in those days, when you're a little kid, it does. She recognised me, so I kind of changed that much from when I was a little kid. But what was interesting is she said, Andrew's been taking an interest in the sort of things you're interested in, and he knows all about you. Andrew's her brother. This little boy I used to play with. We used to go around, we went to Scoma Island, we went around St David's Bay, and we went around all these little seaside places near where I used to live, when I was like 5, 6, 7 years old. And he remembers me, and she recognised me and remembers me, and he's like been watching her Panwo and things like that. And Rachel then said to me, could you get him a signed copy of your book, Roswell Rising? And I says, yeah, sure. So I don't know where he is. He doesn't live in Oxford, this guy. Rachel, his older sister, has moved into Oxford, and it seems coincidentally she's moved into a house just round the corner from my dad, and she's been round to see my dad. She sort of knows him, because my dad was a friend of her dad, who's dead now. Her father was this man I vaguely remember, but he was a good friend of my dad's when they lived in Wales. And her brother has been watching her Panwo. So basically I went round, I delivered to her a copy of Roswell Rising. I signed it, "Dear Andrew." you know, I don't remember this kid actually. Well, I remember them both vaguely, and so I gave it to her, and she then passed £10 from him on to me. I don't know where he lives actually. I should have asked her. He doesn't live in Oxford. I never met him since I was like a little kid and I left Wales. And about a month later, she came to me and she said, "Oh, Andrew's read Roswell Rising. He really loves it. He really thinks it's good." And I thought, cool. Would you like a copy of Roswell Revealed? And she said, "I'll ask him." But what he did ask me to do was, he says he's got a load. He gave me a load of books to give to you. She said, and then she handed me this. She handed me this shopping bag here, filled with books, and I've not looked into them yet. So now I'm going to unbag these books that my old friend from years ago when I was a little kid has been reading. And so I've not looked at them yet, so I thought I would just... it's been about a week since she gave me this bag, and I haven't had a chance really to look at it properly. But I thought I would just quickly have a look in this bag and check out what the books are. So let's grab the first one. This is the first time I've ever looked inside this bag at what these books are. So the first book is Gladio, NATO's Dagger at the Heart of Europe, the Pentagon Nazi Mafia, Terror Axis, by Richard Cotterill. And this, you can pause and read the back cover if you want. Yeah, the recent attack on Libya laid bare the iron fist behind the velvet glove of slogans like human rights and international community. This latest aggression, like the destruction of Yugoslavia and the rape of Afghanistan, proceeds under the cover of NATO. And what is NATO? Richard Cotterill tells the story of mayhem, murder and subversion behind the Alliance for Peace. Now I know about this story. Now, I've not heard of Richard Cotterill, but there's a picture of him anyway. But I have heard of Gladio. Now, Gladio refers to Operation Gladio, and there's a very good documentary you can get. You'll probably only find it on BitChute actually, because it keeps disappearing from YouTube. But it's like it's from Chronicle, an old TV series, a history TV series from years ago on the BBC. Basically, what happened was part of the strategy of NATO in the Cold War, which ran from the end of World War II to the late 1980s, was to lead. They had what they call stay-behind armies. Now, this was basically a covert guerrilla force, basically ordinary people who were trained up to act as a resistance movement should the Soviet Union and the Warsaw Pact countries invade Western Europe. And they were trained in all kinds of sabotage, terrorism, and theft, burglary. They would raise money from bank robberies. They had secret bases, and they used to go out training at weekends, a bit like the Territorial Army. And then they go back to their normal lives during the week, and they never told anyone who they were. So it makes sense. I mean, there was even something similar in Britain, although Operation Gladio never affected Britain, luckily, but it affected most of the countries on the continent. But then it turns out, then a number of very brutal terrorist attacks started appearing across the continent, in Germany, France, Italy. And one of them, in fact, was the second worst terrorist attack after 9/11. It was the Bologna railway bombing in 1980. You may know about the Mandela effect with the clocks, the clock hands, where the time of day was. I think it was 150 people killed, something like that. This was blamed on the New Nuclear Army, which is a neo-fascist terrorist group in Italy. However, it turns out that the New Nuclear Army was actually being run by agents from Operation Gladio, so it was actually part of this stay-behind network. And there were many, many other things. There were like a series of very brutal bank robberies and shop robberies in Belgium, where people would go in and stick their... Normally, someone robbing a place will actually threaten someone with a gun. These people went in and actually shot the cashier without threatening them. Very brutal. But they're horrible. But it turns out that these were also run by the CIA and NATO and all these other things. The secret armies forged bonds with organised crimes and neo-fascists. NATO-backed coups struck down governments in Greece, Turkey. The island state of Cyprus was sundered amid a bitter genocide. Urban guerrillas like the Red Brigades and Baader-Meinhof gang were cunningly manipulated. That's true. Now this is infamous. This is the Red Army faction, which there's a great film called Baader-Meinhof Complex. It's a German film, but you can get it with subtitles. It's very good. And it's basically, these are like far left terrorists who had a campaign of violence in Germany, peaking in the mid-1970s, in which they shot people, they planted bombs, at one point they kidnapped some big corporation head and they killed him. Very interesting. Italy gained deep state government. Italy gained a deep state government, the ultra-secret P2 pseudo-Masonic lodge founded by the Blackshirs. Yeah, that was the P2, of course, Propaganda Due. That's infamous because they're behind the killing of the first John Paul Pope. John Paul Pope I. Pope John Paul I. Yeah, these... masquerading as a rearguard against Soviet invaders, NATO's covert forces warped into psychological and physical terrorism. These were the years of lead, in which hundreds perished in a synthetic war in the streets of Europe. NATO Commander General Lyman Lemnitzer ordered serial attacks on French President Charles de Gaulle, sacked from the Pentagon by John F. Kennedy for rank insubordination, and exiled to Europe. Did Lemnitzer reap revenge in Dallas? Ah, yeah. So it brings up the Kennedy assassination. Swedish Premier Olof Palme, Italian ex-PM Aldo Moro were assassinated. Yeah, by this was the Red Brigade. The Brigade Rossi was one of these networks associated with the Baader-Meinhof gang. Yeah. Pope John Paul II was shot by Turkish gangsters who had regular work as Gladio guns for hire. In 2009, a Gladio copycat outfit codenamed Ergun Keon came to light in Turkey. Yeah. So basically, these are provable false flag operations. Richard Cotterill enjoyed a long career in British journalism. In 1979, he was elected as a Conservative in the first direct elections to the European Parliament. Over the next 10 years, he sat on important committees and published 2 books. The Sacred Cow was a polemical attack on the EU's farm policy. Blood on Their Hands, an extended inquiry he performed on behalf of the Parliament into the murder of the BBC reporter Anne Chapman under the military junta in Greece. All right. I didn't know about that one, yeah. Robert Steele says this is really, really good. Yeah. So this is, thank you very much, Andrew, for that. I'll have a read of that. Right, next book. I haven't read this. Yes, Christopher Dunn. No, I read the one by David Hatcher Childress. The Giza Power Plant, Technologies of Ancient Egypt by Christopher Dunn. Now, I've read one, I think, that's similar or titled by David Hatcher Childress, but this is The Secrets of the Giza Pyramid, Machine Revealed. Now, there was an article in Nexus about this. Did a highly advanced civilization exist in prehistory? Yes. Is the Giza Pyramid a remnant of that technology? Yeah. Well, there's this theory that the Great Pyramid of Giza is some kind of power plant. It's some kind of, as the title suggests, it's designed to generate energy of some kind. Now, it's a theory as good as any other. I mean, if you think of one thing, it certainly was just a tomb. It was not a tomb for the pharaoh Khufu. We know that it did have like something that looks like a sarcophagus in the Queen's chamber. In the King's chamber. There's no evidence actually that anyone was ever buried in the Queen's chamber, let alone a particular queen. But we don't know that it was actually ever held a body when the pyramid was explored first. I mean, the thing is, people did break into it before then, hoping to find gold, but whether they found any, I don't know. One thing's certain is there are no inscriptions on the interior of the pyramid anywhere, or even on the outside. There are no. There is graffiti, but there are no actual inscriptions that were created by the builders, which is odd when you consider that in the tombs of the Valley of the Kings, for example, the walls and ceilings are covered with writing and pictures, long narratives about the person buried there. And in the pictorial language of ancient Egypt, hieroglyphs. There's nothing like that in Egypt apart from graffiti. So maybe that's what it was, yeah. But that's very interesting. It talks about it was actually a large acoustical device. By its size and dimensions, the crystal edifice created a harmonic resonance with the Earth and converted the Earth's vibrational energies into microwave radiation. That's similar to what Nikola Tesla did, didn't he, with the Wardenclyffe Tower? That looks good. Well, thank you very much for that, Andrew. Third book. Transhumanism, a grimoire of alchemical agendas by Dr. Joseph P. Farrell and Dr. Scott DeHart. Now, I know Joseph P. Farrell, I've heard of him. The ultimate question is no longer who am I or why am I here. These questions were answered in the earliest civilizations by philosophers and priests. Today we live in an age of such rapid advances in technology and science that the ultimate question must be rephrased. What shall we be? This book investigates what may become of human civilization. Who is setting the agenda? Who is setting the agenda for a transhumanist civilization, and why? This book exposes us, lifts the veil from the macabre transhumanist monster being assembled, and exposes the hidden history of the agenda that has set humanity on collision course for the apocalypse. Blimey, that sounds cheerful, doesn't it? There's a bit of light reading for you. But I mean, transhumanism is, you may have heard about Ray Kurzweil and 2045 effect, which is where he talks about how basic humans and machines could be merged, and eventually we essentially leave behind our entire biology and become like immortal computers. You know, it's if we can, like, he talks about uploading a human brain onto a computer, and so you never die, and you never forget anything, and you'd be able to think. You'd have, your brain would work at the speed of a computer. It begins with, of course, the implanting of chips and things like that into human brains, and things like that. Now, this is, of course, there's a very sinister side to that, because, of course, as what's his name? I've just forgotten the name of someone. It'll come to me in a minute. But a great Australian researcher did a documentary about this, where he says quite clearly, you know, what's his bloody name? I know it so well. What is the what the vision that some people might have for the future of humans, that is supermen, basically, cyborg, semi-robotic, and the vision that the ruling classes might have for people. Max Egan, you bloody idiot, Max Egan, yeah. How could I forget that? The vision that the political classes might have for the rest of humanity might be very different. If you allow someone to put a chip into your brain, you're allowing them access to, basically, it's like handing over your willpower. The last keep of the fortress is gone, that is the mind. Your thoughts are not your own, to quote Neil Sanders. We have another one. Now, this is another book by Farrell, the Giza Death Star by Joseph P. Farrell. Now, I have read this. It's very, very interesting here. It's similar to the one about the power plant, but instead it claims that this is that it's actually a weapon. It's actually designed as some kind of weapon. It says here, the physicist Joseph Farrell's amazing books on the secrets of the Great Pyramid. Among the topics discussed in detail are an archaeology of mass destruction, Thoth and theories, the machine hypothesis, Plato. It's a good book. It's very complicated, but that's what you get from. You always get these things from Farrell. He's an academic, basically. He's an academic. Very, very interesting. But it suggests that this is actually some kind of military complex. Yeah. Were the pyramids of Giza part of a gigantic military experiment to create a Death Star beam weapon? An experiment gone horribly wrong. Thank you very much for that, Andrew. We're getting through them. There's about a dozen of these books actually in here. Now, my next book is this is a Full Spectrum Dominance by William F. Engdahl. Now, you may know there he is. There you can see. Pause and read the back cover. Now, you may know that Engdahl's quite well known. He spoke at the AV conferences, which I attended. One of them, anyway. This is the totalitarian democracy in a new world order. Totalitarian democracy. I like that. That is just so. That's so good. Now, I've not read this book, but I have actually listened to Engdahl do a talk. He had a book called Seeds of Destruction about GMOs. A totalitarian democracy in the New World Order. Yeah, it sounds contradictory, but it's not, of course. From the faction controlling the Pentagon, the military industry, and the oil industry, the Cold War never ended. They engineered an incredible plan to grab total control of the planet of land, sea, air, space, outer space, and cyberspace. Well, the idea of the Cold War not ending is interesting, because look at how Western powers are antagonising Russia. I mean, don't believe all the shite about Russia being behind it all. You know, Russia are horrible, they're all reckless pilots and they're poisoners and they're computer hackers. No, it's all bollocks. Nick Colostrum has proved that. I mean, listen to the last two interviews I did with Nick Colostrum on Hopanmo Radio. He's proved that the whole thing was set up. It's all a lie. There's basically fake. These actions are like the Skripals, for example, and Alexei Navalny. It's all fake. It was all done. It wasn't done by the Russians at all. They're just trying to demonise Russia in order to keep the military-industrial complex going in its original formation, which is the formation of the Cold War. And basically, the Soviet Union was too good an enemy to lose. And when they did lose it, they think, damn, what are we going to do to replace it? We've got to replace it with something. I know. Let's make an enemy out of the new Russia. And that's what they've been doing for the last 30 years. Oh, here we go. Right, yeah. They create a global network of military bases and conflicts to advance the long-term goal of full-spectrum dominance. Yeah, look what's happened since Joe Biden did not fake his way. It is going on YouTube. I've got to be careful what I say. Did not fake his way into the White House. Before he fell down the stairs on Air Force One, he was just saying, doing an interview where he said that in May, when in Afghanistan, the final few thousand troops, which Trump moved out all the rest of the troops, he left behind a few thousand, just like maintenance crews. He said that when they're supposed to leave in May, that's what Trump arranged with the Afghan national government. Biden's now saying that that might not happen. They may decide to stay. Which, of course, if the Afghan government say no, there'll be a bloody regime change. So, you see what I mean? Methods include control of propaganda, the use of NGOs for regime change, yeah, colour revolutions to advance NATO eastwards, and the vast array of psychological and economic warfare techniques, yes. Yeah, they do. I mean, the NGOs is interesting. I mean, people often ask, what's the difference between communism and fascism? Well, we think of one that the communism is far left and fascism is far right. And that's because during the 20th century, fascism was always associated with nationalism and racial identity and things like that. But that's not necessarily the case. You can have global fascism. The only fundamental difference between fascism and communism is in fascism the private sector remains intact. In communism the private sector is obliterated and basically its role is basically subsumed by the state. In fascism, the private sector remains intact, but it just contributes to the domination that would otherwise be done completely by the state with communism. Really, it makes no difference. As George Orwell once said, if a boot is really stamping on your face, does it matter if it's a left boot or a right boot? They even used the Save the Guerrilla organisations in Africa to secretly run armies to create wars for new materials. It was all part of the revolution in military affairs, as they termed it. Project for the New American Century. I didn't know that about the conservation, the Save the Guerrillas organisation in Africa, to run arms to create wars. Because that's what you'll find is in parts of Africa there have been wars breaking out, and they tend to be where they strike oil and other things, and where there's mines. Yeah. The events of September 11th, 2001 would allow the American president to declare a worldwide war on terror on an enemy who was everywhere and nowhere. 9/11 justified the Patriot Act, the very act that destroyed America's constitutional freedoms in the name of security. And that's continuing today, isn't it? Except now it's what evil Nazis and racists and things, isn't it? People like me, basically. They're actually the America's now is using its own citizens now as the enemy. They're branding anyone basically to the right of Joseph Stalin, a fascist and a Nazi and a racist. And they've got to be banned from Twitter. It's not going to stop with being banned from Twitter. It's going to be done everywhere. This book gives a disturbing look at the strategy for full spectrum dominance and what is behind a strategy that could lead to us into a horrific nuclear war in the very near future, or at least, very least, to a world of continuous war. Yeah. He's written other books such as Seeds of Destruction, the hidden agenda behind genetic manipulation, GMO foods and stuff like that. So yeah, very good book. Thank you, Andrew, for that. Well, I've not read the book, but I'm familiar with Engdahl. I find him very, very interesting. This is a big, heavy book, big, thick book now. But it's got a long picture section. Grey Aliens and the Harvesting of Souls. The Conspiracy to Genetically Tamper with Humanity by Nigel Kerner. Now, I've not heard of this. Not heard of this, but here it is. It looks like quite an old book. It's done in the kind of 1990s style. When you write books and get interested in publishing, you soon find that you recognise book design and things like that. Yeah. No, sorry, I was wrong. Copyright 2010. It's not 1990s. Yeah. Nigel Kerner's shocking new book totally redefines the nature of alien presence on our planet. He detailed that it's certain to send shockwaves through the world of UFO research. Kerner offers a terrifying theory to explain the presence of the so-called extraterrestrial greys in our world. A book that should and must be read. That's a glowing review, and it's from none other than Nick Redfern. I like Nick Redfern. I interviewed him once on Panmo Radio. He's a good guy. In 1997, Nigel Kerner first introduced the notion of aliens known as greys come to Earth, explaining they are sophisticated biological robots created by an intelligent extraterrestrial civilization they have long since outlived. In this new book he reveals the greys are seeking to master death by obtaining something humans possess that they do not: souls. Through the manipulation of DNA they hope to create their own souls and thereby escape the entropic grip of the material universe in favour of a timeless realm of spirit. I've heard of things like that before. There's someone else. I think it was that Wingmakers thing, which is quite, I mean, it was completely fake, but it was quite amusing. If you see it as a work of fiction, you may remember the Wingmakers. It was supposedly real, but it wasn't. I mean, but it's a great story. Yeah. Yes, but they talk about that some aliens don't have souls. Although, of course, if you didn't have a soul, you wouldn't be alive. You'd be like, you wouldn't have a consciousness, so you wouldn't be able to make decisions about. If you didn't have a soul, you wouldn't be able to say, "Oh, I wish you had a soul," because you wouldn't be able to wish for anything. You'd be. I mean, there's a deep philosophical element to this question, but you'd basically be saying, "Well, I don't know anything. I don't want anything. I don't know anything." You wouldn't be able to say, "I." I think, therefore I am. The Cartesian principle. Kerner explains that genetic manipulation by the greys has occurred since biblical times and has led to numerous negative qualities that plague humanity, such as violence, greed and maliciousness. Racism, he contends, was developed by the aliens to prevent their genetic experiments from being compromised by breeding with others outside their influence. I thought it was invented by the Frankfurt School to tear people apart and break down society. But there you are, maybe there's another theory. Examining historical records, Kerner shows that Jesus represented an uncorrupted genetic line and warned his disciples about the threat posed by these alien interlopers, while Hitler, a pure product of this alien intelligence, waged genocide in an attempt to rid Earth of all those untouched by the genetic tampering. Despite the powerful grip the Greys have on humanity, Kerner says that hope is not lost. Greys exist wholly in the material world, so if you follow the spiritual laws of reincarnation and karma, aiming for enlightenment, rising above the material, a state that Greys are unable to reach, we can free ourselves from their grasp. Oh, right, he's also written a Song of the Grey. Oh, right, that sounds a bit New Agey. It sounds a cross between a sort of sci-fi horror and New Age, but I'll give it a go. There's a picture section on the inside. This is like, there's a picture of the Turin Shroud there. Oh, right. Okay, I'll have a look at that later. Anyway, next book. Covert Wall and Breakaway Civilization, The Secret Space Program, Celestial Psyops and Hidden Conflicts by Joseph P. Farrell. Right. Have I read this? Look, sounds familiar. I've been reading Farrell since I first became a woo-woo in the 90s. I told you this unboxing wasn't going to be a conventional one. A culture of total power, a vast system of hidden finance, counterfeiting and fraud. Oxford-educated historian. Oh, right, so it's not just the Illuminati we educate. Joseph P. Farrell really delivers in this latest addition to his best-selling book series on suppressed technology, Nazi survival and post-war hidden conflicts, like the ones in Antarctica. Yeah, the Nazi hideout in Antarctica. His customary meticulous research and sharp analysis blow the lid off a worldwide web of nefarious financial and technological control few people even suspect exists. Well, that's the New World Order, isn't it? That's the banking system, things like that. That's G. Edward Griffin wrote about. Farrell delves into the creation of a breakaway civilization by the Nazis in South America and other parts of the world. He discusses the advanced technology that they took with them at the end, quote unquote, of World War II. Yeah, it was a quote unquote. It carried on in Antarctica for at least 2 more years. And the psychological war they waged for decades against America and NATO. He shows how the breakaway civilization has created a huge system of hidden finance with the involvement of the Vatican Bank, among others. Again, it comes down to Gelli, God's banker, Luciano Gelli. He was murdered in London, hung from Blackfriars Bridge, and that connects to P2. You remember the scandal of that. Farrell includes a fascinating discussion on the emulation technologies. Those that can manipulate acts of God and nature, like earthquakes and storms. I've heard that that's possible, actually. Well, weather control certainly, isn't it? I've done entire videos on that. Or my last Sky Watching in Devon video, the second one, I talk about weather control. Because I visit Lynmouth, where the disaster happened. So breakaway civilization is actually a phrase used regularly by Richard Dolan. And it talks here, it mentions full spectrum dominance, which is of course the title of Engdahl's book. A culture of plausible deniability. Yeah, there are plans for mass destruction that can never be traced back to the real source. Of course, they cover their footsteps wherever they go. Remember what I was talking about with Sarah Everard? It's being portrayed as simply one guy who killed a woman independently, and there's nothing more to see here. Move along. Farrell discusses the historical origin of the breakaway civilization and the continuing airship mystery. But it actually precedes the Nazis, though, the breakaway civilization. I mean, it's basically like the Illuminati, which goes back much further, of course, way before the 20th century. The airship mystery, of course, refers to the earliest UFOs, basically the earliest recorded in the modern times UFO flaps in the late 19th century, which culminated with the Aurora incident, where there was a crash retrieval in 1897. They have a nexus of spy satellites, nuclear weapons and UFOs. He includes plenty of astounding accounts, documents and speculation on the amazing alternative history and hidden conflicts. Super finance and technology, yeah. Very interesting guy. Farrell, he's an interesting guy. Obviously Andrew likes Farrell, and that's very interesting, he likes Farrell. That shows that he's quite... Andrew is obviously quite high up. He's quite advanced on this journey into the world of like high strangeness, because Farrell is actually quite heavy reading for you. I mean, when I started off with David Icke, who's actually a lot more comprehensive. Farrell is a lot more advanced. He's kind of what I moved on to after Icke. Although I didn't leave Icke behind, but I sort of moved on to other areas when I'd read a few Icke books. So yeah, Andrew's obviously quite advanced. I hope I meet him sometime. Right, this is the Dimensions of Paradise, Sacred Geometry, Ancient Science and the Heavenly Order on Earth. And that is by John Mitchell. Right, this is the priests of ancient Egypt preserved a geometric canon, a numerical code of harmonies and proportions that they applied to music, art, stagecraft and the institution of civilization. Plato, an initiate of Egyptian mysteries, said it was an instrument by which the ancient maintained high principle standards of culture over thousands of years. In Dimensions of Paradise, John Mitchell describes the result of a lifetime's research, demonstrating how the same numerical code underlies sacred structures from ancient times to the Christian era, the measurements of Stonehenge, the foundation plan of Glastonbury, and Plato's ideal city, the heavenly city of the New Jerusalem. Oh, interesting. Yeah, this is a guy educated at Eton and Cambridge. Yeah, so that's very... He's written other books called The New View over Atlantis. Now, what's interesting is that I've not read this. Obviously, I'll have to read this book to find out. But he's referring to things such as the phi proportion, the golden mean, squaring the circle, and there's some diagrams in here which show you what they're like. The Vitruvian Man, things like that. Now, this kind of sacred geometry, the flower of life, can be found in the cathedrals which were built in the through the beginning of the last millennium in many cities across Europe. These are amazing structures. They're not just big churches in the middle of cities. they are built by people who had Masonic, who put the Freemasons basically emerged out of the builders of those cathedrals. I mean, some of them are 1,000 years old. They still dominate the skylines of our cities. They're not just big churches. Did you think that's all they were? Just because they're used by Christians and they have Christian iconography. They weren't built. They're not really that. That's just, they're just the Christians, just the people who moved in. The cathedrals are temples, and they all have things like the fee proportion, the golden mean. This is why when you play music in a cathedral, the acoustics are particularly good. And a lot of studio recording, is actually moved and done in cathedrals because they can get a much better thing than they can in the normal studio. That sounds interesting. Thanks, Andrew, for that. Okay, there's a few more left. The Philosopher's Stone, Alchemy and the Secret Research for Esoteric Matter by Joseph P. Farrell yet again. Joseph P. Farrell, right. The Philosopher's Stone reveals the connections between the little known ideas of physics and ancient alchemy. Examining American, Soviet and Nazi research, Farrell traces out the alchemy's view of an information creating physical medium, and shows how this idea is related to the phenomenon of high spin rotation and the unusual properties in matter that it includes. Alright. Now, this rotation thing is very interesting because a lot of people have talked about, you know, there's Podkletnov, I think, was it Podkletnov, the guy in Russia who worked out that you spin you spin a ring or a disc, and it creates like energy. Very brilliant. That's interesting. This is I've not heard of this one before, but that I'm sure is very interesting because. But you know, the creation of energy out of nothing. How it goes from the rotating disc. You rotate a disc in a certain way, or a ring of magnets. It actually creates an anti-gravity field. You can actually reduce the weight of you can reduce the weight of a mass held above it. Like if it's like a 10-stone weight, it becomes 9.5 stone or something like that above a spinning magnet. This is another Farrell book. Saucers, swastikas and psyops. The history of a breakaway civilization, hidden aerospace technologies and psychological operations. What do the following have in common? Nazi scientists, ufologist George Adamski, Wall Street, the CIA, and mafia drug lords. Well, George Adamski was more an experiencer than an ufologist, but all the above are components of the breakaway civilization. The civilization has access to the most advanced technologies and an almost bottomless source of funding. They see the breakaway civilization is older than Farrell says. You know about the Antikythera mechanism, this thing that was this amazing machine that was found on a sunken ship. That the ship had sunk in the 1st century BC. Yet this was something the equivalent of a Renaissance timepiece, which indicates there was a breakaway civilization not only long before the Nazis, but long before, before Jesus. Yeah, it stages events for the gullible, true, and tortures those who begin to detect its existence. Yeah, they get you, like David Icke, they sack you from your job and things like that, get you kicked off the BBC. The civilization has its own ideology and dubious morality. It doesn't have a morality. It has this remarkable, well-researched expose. Oxford-educated historian Joseph P. Farrell breaks apart this breakaway civilization, lays it out for all to see. This is the next chapter in his best-selling series on suppressed technology, the survival of the Nazi regime and post-World War II psyops. Yeah. Well, that's very interesting indeed. That's another interesting book by Mr. Farrell, Dr. Farrell, pardon me. Yeah, and we're nearly at the end of this. Well, there's 2 more books. This one is called Babylon's Banksters by Joseph P. Farrell, yet again. Oh, right. The Alchemy of Deep Physics, High Finance and Ancient Religion. An international class of banksters has pursued a consistent strategy to enslave mankind by usurping the money and creating and issuing the power of the state to suppress public development of alternative physics and energy technology. Correct, yeah, they are, they basically, by controlling the money system, by controlling finance, they actually have a very, very powerful weapon in controlling the rest of the world in terms of our economy, sociology, things like that. I mean, G. Edward Griffin. I do recommend G. Edward Griffin's The Beast from Jekyll Island as well. If you want to know about how the financial system emerged, the modern financial system, and what it did, and how it controls our lives to this day, and who, the people behind it, that's the one to look at, I tell you. Joseph P. Farrell shows how there is a deep physics behind the astrological charts of the great American economic depressions, and reveals an association of banksters with temples, and why the temples were so crucial to the banksters' operations. Yeah, well, that's what, as I said earlier, that's what cathedrals are, aren't they? Temples. The Freemasons, basically, the Freemasons didn't build the temples. The cathedrals, the cathedral builders and architects became the Freemasons. There's a good book called Born in Blood, which shows about the origin of Freemasonry. It's very interesting. Oh, you know, the thing about it's a very interesting that the element of astrology comes into it, because the official position is people laugh at astrology. However, if you look at the actions of the Illuminati, various political events, elections, assassinations, terrorist attacks, things like that, they seem to match up with astrological markers, which indicates that at a deeper level the government actually not only believes in astrology, it uses it. Which calls into question the whole idea that astrology is crazy and nuts. I mean, I don't know a lot about astrology, to be honest. I know I'm a Libra, but that's about it. But I mean, it is an I mean, I know a bit more than that, but I still find it interesting. I think it's an interesting concept. I just haven't studied it in detail. Slavery, usurpation of the money-creating power of the state, the invention of a debt as money, economic cycles, and astrology. Yeah, the boom-bust cycle, the interesting, the creation of credit, the manipulation of money that is not backed up by capital. I mean, they do this all the time. I mean, they abandoned the gold standard. In fact, I told you about that lady. I mentioned it in one of my videos. Which one was it? The lady who was like an economist who Trump appointed to the Treasury. I think she was actually chairman of the Federal Reserve. She was a gold standard. She was interested in the gold standard. And the first thing Biden did when he's completely legitimately, without any fraud, became president, I think he sacked her, replaced her with another fiat currency guy. But yeah, I mean, the thing about Muhammad Gaddafi, when they killed him, a mob kicked him to death in the streets. In Libya, it's got nothing to do with whether, because he was kissing the Americans' ass, wasn't he? He was kissing Bush and Blair, and he was kissing their ass all the time and saying, "Yeah, I'm on your side, guys. But I would like to set up a Bank of Africa, connected to the gold standard. You don't mind, do you?" And Hillary Clinton, who was Secretary of State under Obama, well, she said, "We came, we saw, and he died." Remember that interview? They didn't invade directly. They can't get away with that anymore. But they basically funded and trained a militia to go in and destroy Gaddafi's regime, because he was going to bring water up from beneath the sand in the Sahara Desert, because the Sahara Desert actually is dry on the surface, but underneath there are aquifers, like underground lakes, and there was enough water there to irrigate the land for 50 years. And he was going to create a Bank of Africa which would basically lift that continent out of poverty, because there's no more issues with third world debts anymore. I mean, it's a gold standard economy there would be a revolution in living standards in Africa if he'd had his way. But then Clinton and her globalist buddies, they sent in the mob to kill him. Just think, she was meant to be president. Yeah, so the debt as money, yeah, that's the thing. It's been the practice and strategy of the banksters since ancient times, and as Farrell quips on the conclusion of this remarkable book, it's high time to have done with them. Yeah, the black nobility, the money lenders in the temples, things like that. It's been used by the Illuminati since time immemorial. It's one of the tricks they learnt, I think, in the early civilizations of when they took over Sumer in Egypt in the way long ago in the second millennium BC, when the Illuminati rose to power in the Middle East. One of the first things they did was when they occupied Egypt and Sumer, they brought in this kind of system, this kind of financial system. They started making silver coins, but what they did is they cut the silver with a cheap metal, but then keep it at the same value, which is basically what we do today with electronic money, computers and things like that. They were doing the same with metals. Oh, that's very interesting. Thank you very much, Babylon's banksters. Yeah, Babylon. It does go back that far to the ancient world. It's amazing. This is the Giza Death Star Destroyed. This is another book here. It's also by Farrell. The final volume in the Giza Death Star trilogy. I didn't know. Oh, I didn't know there was more than one. I only read one of them. Was it this one or the other? I read one of them. Which one was it? The Ancient War for Future Science. This is The Ancient War for Future Science. In his previous books on the subject, physicist Farrell postulates that the Great Pyramid of Egypt was actually a device capable of harnessing the Earth's resonance and transforming it into a powerful maser energy which could be beamed into space. Well, that's like the Giza power plant. You could use it to create energy to fuel your civilization, but of course, as with all these other things, it's a double-edged sword, because the ploughshare could be beaten into a sword. So weapons could be made out of free energy, like in that book, that Robert Napier book. What was it called? I reviewed it actually on one of my videos. It was used for military purposes and had a disastrous effects on the Earth and the entire solar system. In this book, Farrell moves on to the events of the final days of the Giza Death Star and its awesome power, and describes what eventually happened on the 10,000-year-old weapon. To the 10,000-year-old weapon, after it was deployed, it was destroyed by an internal explosion. The events leading up to the destruction of this giant machine are dissected one by one, leading us to the eventual abandonment of the Giza military complex, an event that hurled civilization back into the Stone Age. The fascinating subjects covered in the book include the Mars-Earth connection. Oh yeah, that's the Cydonia, the structures on Mars, which, of course, in the distant past, Mars was more like the Earth. It had flowing water on it, which means it must have had a thicker atmosphere, and it must have been an awful lot warmer. So why shouldn't an intelligent animal species have evolved that created the face on Mars and the pyramids, and the five-sided pyramid and things like that? I talk about that in my Great Escape video. The lost root races and the moral reasons for the flood. The destruction of Krypton. Destruction of Krypton, the electromagnetic solar system. Krypton is a fictional planet from the Superman franchise. I don't know. Anyway, I haven't read this particular book, I don't think. The exploding planets and ancient wars, the origin of the secret societies and esoteric traditions, the quest to recover ancient mega-technology, non-equilibrium paleophysics, monatomic paleophysics, frequencies, vortices and mass particles, and other arcane topics. That's interesting. Exploding planets. Some people say that the asteroid belt used to be a planet. They call it Marduk or something. Sitchin goes into that, but the actual mass of the asteroid belt is not big enough to produce if you put it all together, it wouldn't be a planet of any significant size, but some of it might have fallen onto Jupiter, into the gas giant. Yeah, ancient wars. It was actually Eric von Daniken who proposed a utopian archaeological year. He said, let's have a year in archaeology where people just let their imagination go crazy, and they look for sort of the results of ancient nuclear wars, radioactive fallout on the Dead Sea and things like that, at the bottom of the Dead Sea where Sodom and Gomorrah were, and things like that. The origins of secret societies. They're older than you think. Yeah, there are secret societies that predate the post-cathedral building Freemasons. Esoteric traditions. I'll tell you what's a good film to watch. The Nostradamus movie. It's a story about Nostradamus, the prophet, told in fictional form. I can't remember the name of the actor who plays him. But he joins like an ancient mystery school. It's really interesting. the quest to recover ancient mega-technology, well, you know, like the Antikythera mechanism and the non-equilibrium paleophysics. Now, I don't know what that means. Monatomic paleophysics, I don't know about that. I know monatomic gold, which is a form of the element which is supposedly very good for you. It's like they found it in the dust. It's like mummy dust. Frequencies, vortices and mass particles and other arcane topics. I'm sure that'd be very interesting. Well, anyway, look, these are all these books here. Oh, there's so many of them. Oh, these... That will keep me quiet for a while. See me through the weekend, won't it? Oh, yeah. Well, that's it. Now, this is the... that's the unbagging done. So, I want to just say thank you very much to Andrew. I know Andrew watches. Rachel, I don't think if Rachel's watching. Thank you very much for delivering these to me. And Andrew, I hope to see you again sometime, mate. You know, I'm sure we can have a good talk. Seeing as you're on this sort of level and you enjoy Hapanwo, that's really appreciated. I remember playing with you. We used to play on the beach, didn't we? We used to try and pull limpets off rocks, and we never could because they were always hung on so tightly to the rocks. Great days, great days. Carefree childhood. Well, it wasn't a carefree childhood, but enough said about that. But anyway, that's an interesting little pile of books I've got there, and well, you know, it's. I thought I would share that. I thought I would share this experience of looking at these for the first time with you guys. So, hope you enjoyed it. My first ever unboxing video. I might do some more, but I'm only kidding about going mainstream. I'm never going to be one of these other sort of like million subscriber typical unboxers. I'll always, if I'm going to do unboxing, it's always going to be of the esoteric Hapanwo-esque variety. That I promise you. Anyway, there's another video coming soon. I've got plans for more, so don't worry, I will be back. And thank you very much for watching Hapanwo TV. Hospital Porters, Pride and Dignity, Stop the New World Order.